AITA for quietly resigning after my father suspended me from work until I apologized to my sister. My name is Lucas Fairchild, and I am 32 years old. I spent 6 years as a project director at Fairchild Development Corporation in Chicago. Not an entry-level position. I ran the entire architectural division, handling all the major projects that made money for the company over the last 5 years. That was my work. The sustainable housing program that won 3 industry awards? Mine. The modular building system that cut construction time by 40%? Also mine. I started at Fairchild right after graduation at 26 with a salary of $58,000 as a junior architect. The first year, I redesigned a failing residential project in Naperville, which saved the company $340,000 and earned me a promotion to senior architect. By year 3, I was a project director with a salary of $94,000 plus bonuses, leading 12 architects and engineers. By year 5, my division was generating 68% of the company's revenue, about $59 million out of $87 million annually. My office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Not because I was born into it, but because I earned it through 80-hour weeks and by transforming impossible deadlines into completed buildings. The walls displayed my Illinois architecture license, my structural engineering certification, and 5 professional awards. One wall featured photos of completed projects: the River's Edge Complex, the Morrison Technology Campus, winner of the 2022 Green Building Award, and the Lakeshore Luxury Residences highlighted in Chicago Magazine. Another wall displayed prototypes of innovations I had developed: the eco-frame system, thermal regulation panels, and the modular foundation system. I had built something concrete, a team that respected the work, a portfolio proving that sustainable luxury was not just a marketing slogan, and a reputation that opened doors. And my father, Robert, the CEO and founder, acted as if all of this belonged to him by default, because Fairchild Development is a family business. Robert founded it 30 years ago doing small residential projects in the suburbs. Today, we build eco-friendly luxury homes for tech executives and custom commercial buildings for companies with too much money. Last year's revenue was around $87 million. That sounds impressive until you realize that given our project portfolio, we should have been hitting $120 million. The difference? My sister, Elena. Elena is 29 and the Vice President of Client Relations, a title that sounds important until you realize she got it at 25 with 0 industry experience. Her degree is in communications from a mid-tier private school that cost Robert $180,000 in tuition. She has never designed a building. She has never managed a construction site. She has never calculated a structural load or reviewed a permit application. What she knows how to do, however, is smile at rich people and promise them things that are physically impossible to achieve. The pattern started in her very first month. She promised a client in Winnetka a custom extension in 6 weeks in the middle of a Chicago winter, when concrete cannot cure properly below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I had to personally negotiate with the client, explain the weather constraints, and push the schedule to 4 months. The client was furious but understanding. Elena kept her commission. Then there was the Oak Park project, where she underbid the budget by $340,000 because she forgot to account for the custom Italian marble the client had expressly requested. I found savings elsewhere, negotiated better rates with suppliers I had built relationships with, and we went over her initial budget by only $80,000. Robert congratulated her for landing such a profitable project. My favorite remains the Evanston disaster. Elena promised a client we could build on land that hadn't even been surveyed yet. It turned out the property was a protected wetland, making any construction illegal without significant mitigation measures. I spent 3 months working with environmental consultants and city officials to redesign the project on an adjacent lot. The client threatened to sue us, but finally accepted the changes. Elena's response when I raised the issue? That is why we have you to handle the details. For years, I covered for her. She promised a client a custom home in 90 days, and I worked miracles to deliver. She underbid a budget by 30%, and I found ways to cut costs without compromising quality. She forgot to file permits, and I smoothed things over with city inspectors with whom I had built relationships over 6 years. The unspoken rule was simple. Elena brought in clients with her sales pitches, her designer outfits bought at Nordstrom, and her charm. I delivered the actual buildings, the ones that didn't collapse and didn't violate building codes. Robert could play the proud father of his 2 children while the money rolled in. Elena's annual commissions hovered around $280,000. My salary was $94,000 with a $12,000 annual bonus if projects stayed under budget, which always happened because I was good at my job. Robert loved this arrangement. At professional events, he introduced Elena as the face of Fairchild Development's future. I was the technical expert who made it all possible, not his son who had built the company's modern reputation, just the technical expert, as if I were a home appliance delivered with the building. The unspoken rule was simple. Elena got the credit and the commissions. I got a salary and the satisfaction of knowing the buildings wouldn't fall down. I told myself it was fine. I was learning, building my reputation. I was waiting for the right moment to start my own firm. The usual lies people tell themselves when they are being exploited by family. Then, 3 days ago, Elena closed a deal that finally pushed me past my breaking point. The client was a tech executive from Silicon Valley who had made a fortune in cryptocurrency. He wanted a $20 million lakefront mansion intended to redefine sustainable luxury and be featured in Architectural Digest. Fine. We had done this kind of project before. Elena took the meeting without me, which should have been my first red flag. She came back with a signed contract and a smile that spelled trouble. Deal closed, she announced, walking into the Monday morning executive meeting as if she had just won the lottery. $20 million project, 12% commission. The client is ready to start work next month. Robert beamed. Excellent work, sweetheart. This is exactly the kind of high-profile project we need. I was examining the quarterly budget projections, half distracted. Then Elena slid the contract across the table. Lucas, you should look at the schedule. The client is very excited about moving in before winter. I took the contract and saw the delivery date, 90 days after obtaining the permit. My stomach nodded. This is a mistake, I said, keeping my voice calm. This must be a typo. Elena's smile didn't waver. No mistake. I promised him a move-in ready house by October 15th. That is what it took to close the deal. Elena, this is an 8,000 square foot custom home with advanced environmental systems. The foundation alone requires 4 weeks to cure correctly. The custom glass panels have a 12-week lead time. Permits will take at least 8 weeks to be issued. She waved a hand dismissively. That is why we have you. You always find a solution. I looked at Robert, waiting for him to show some common sense. He looked at me with an expectant expression, as if I were about to solve a math problem he already knew the answer to. Dad, this is physically impossible. Even by cutting corners, which we cannot do because of building codes, we would need a minimum of 9 months. I have heard impossible from you before, Lucas, he replied. And yet, somehow, the buildings always get finished. Because I work miracles within the limits of the laws of physics. This is not a miracle, it is fraud. If we promise 90 days and deliver in 9 months, the client will sue us for breach of contract. Elena leaned back in her chair, examining her nails. Maybe if you spent less time making excuses and more time managing your team, we would not have this problem. That was the moment I made my decision, not on an emotional impulse. I was long past the emotional stage. I was acting strategically. I pulled out my laptop and opened the project management software. I spent the next 2 hours building a realistic construction schedule with every task, every dependency, and every resource allocation clearly detailed. I added margins for weather delays and material deliveries. I ran the critical path analysis 3 times to be sure everything was flawless. The result? 267 days from permit issuance to certificate of occupancy. Almost 9 months. I compiled it all into a professional report with photos of similar projects, testimonials from contractors on delivery times, and citations from Illinois building codes governing curing times and inspection schedules. It was impossible to dispute. Then I sent it to the client, copying Elena and Robert. The email was simple. Dear Mr. Zhao, thank you for choosing Fairchild Development. After reviewing the project's specifications in detail, I wish to provide you with a realistic timeline to ensure the quality and compliance you have a right to expect. Please find the construction schedule attached. I remain at your disposal for any questions. I clicked send at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. At 7:15 p.m., Elena was screaming outside my office. She didn't knock. She burst in while I was checking structural calculations for another project. "What the hell did you just do?" she screamed, her face red with rage. "I sent the client an accurate schedule," I replied calmly, not looking up from my screen. "It is called professional integrity. You just torpedoed my contract. He is threatening to pull out. Then he should pull out, because we cannot deliver what you promised, and pretending otherwise will end in a lawsuit that will cost us far more than the commission you are chasing." She slammed her fist on my desk. "I am Vice President of Client Relations. You do not contact my clients without my permission. And I am the project director who has to actually build these buildings. When you promise the impossible, it becomes my problem. I am fixing the problem." She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. 2 minutes later, Robert called my office line. "Lucas, in my office. Now." I saved my work, closed my laptop, and walked down the hall to the executive suite. Elena was already there, sitting in the leather chair opposite Robert's desk, arms crossed with that smug smile on her face. Robert was behind his desk, hands clasped, looking at me as if I were a teenager caught shoplifting. "Elena tells me you went over her head with a client without authorization. I provided accurate information about the project to avoid a lawsuit for breach of contract. You undermined your sister's authority. I prevented the company from committing fraud." His jaw tightened. "We do not use that word in this office." "Then what word do you prefer? Misrepresentation? False promise? Negligent statement?" Elena interjected, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Lucas, I know you are stressed. You work a lot, but you cannot send emails to clients whenever you feel like it. There is a hierarchy. Hierarchy does not replace the laws of physics, Elena." Robert stood up, a gesture of authority he used to intimidate. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to call Mr. Zhao and apologize. You are going to tell him you were being overly cautious and that we can perfectly respect the timeline promised by Elena. I will not lie to a client. Then you are suspended for 2 weeks without pay. And when you come back, you will apologize to your sister for this insubordination." The room went silent. Elena was trying not to smile. I looked at Robert, really looked at him, and saw something I had been avoiding for 6 years. He didn't see me as his son. He saw me as a resource, a machine that produced buildings and solved problems. When the machine questioned its programming, you shut it down for maintenance. "Okay," I said. Not, "Yes, sir," nor "I understand," nor any of the answers he expected. Just one word. "Okay." The way his face changed confirmed that he had perfectly understood what I meant. It wasn't submission, it was acceptance. I accepted that we had fundamentally different values, and that trying to change his mind was a waste of time. I walked out of his office without another word. My office had been my sanctuary for 6 years. Everything in it represented something I had built or earned. The University of Illinois diploma I had paid for myself, the structural engineering certification I studied for while working 60 hours a week, the awards from the Illinois Architecture Foundation, the photos of my team celebrating completed projects. I had built a career here, a reputation, a standard of excellence that Fairchild Development had never reached before my arrival, and now I was going to dismantle it all. I closed the door without locking it, and took 3 boxes from the supply closet. Then I began to pack methodically. The diplomas first. I wrapped them in bubble wrap, not with nostalgia, but with the efficiency of someone archiving evidence. The trophies next, then the project photos, the prototypes of the structural systems I had designed. My assistant, Monica, knocked and poked her head in. She looked terrified. In an office, rumors travel faster than emails. "Lucas, are you okay? I heard you were taking leave." "Monica, go home for the day. You will still get paid, but I need you to leave the office." "But I have that presentation to finish for." "It does not matter anymore. Go home." She stood still for a moment, confused, then nodded and left. Smart girl. She would understand soon enough. As I packed, I kept coming back to one object, the prototype of the Fairchild Signature Eco-Frame. It was the masterpiece, a modular and sustainable load-bearing system that reduced construction time by 40% and increased energy efficiency by 50%. It had taken me 2 years to design, test, and perfect it. Hundreds of hours of calculations, dozens of failed prototypes, meetings with structural engineers and materials scientists. Robert loved it because it saved him millions in materials and labor. Elena loved it because she could sell it as a revolutionary green technology. Neither of them knew I had filed the patents in my own name. That is the thing about working in a family business. You learn very early to protect yourself. In my first year at Fairchild, I saw Robert take credit for an innovative foundation design developed by a senior architect named Victor Leong, which reduced subsidence problems in clay soils. Victor had spent 8 months perfecting it, testing it on 3 different projects, and documenting every modification. Robert presented it at a professional conference as Fairchild Development's revolutionary approach to difficult soils. He never mentioned Victor once. Victor resigned 3 months later and started his own firm. Robert continued to use his design without compensation or attribution. I learned the lesson immediately. From my second year on, I started documenting everything. Every innovation, every process improvement, every design modification that made projects faster or cheaper. I kept detailed technical notebooks with dates, sketches, and calculations, the kind of documentation that holds up in a patent application. In my third year, I met Sophia Park, an intellectual property lawyer who handled architectural patent cases. We met at an Illinois Architecture Foundation event. She handed me her card with a knowing smile. "Document everything," she told me, "and consider filing provisional patents before showing your work to anyone." That conversation changed everything. I created my own LLC, Fairchild Innovation LLC, intentionally using the Fairchild name so as not to arouse suspicion. It cost me $800 to register in Illinois. I started routing patent applications through the LLC rather than Fairchild Development. The EcoFrame system took me 2 years to perfect. It all started with a basic concept. What if load-bearing walls could be modular and manufactured off-site? I spent my weekends drawing plans, running simulations, and calculating load distributions. I used my own money, about $14,000, to build prototypes and test them in a lab in Schaumburg. I filed the provisional patent application in my third year, before even mentioning the system to Robert. I then spent another 9 months refining it based on real-world tests. I filed the full utility patent in year 4. By the time Robert saw the finalized system and understood how much it could earn for Fairchild Development, the intellectual property was already locked in my name. The same pattern followed for the thermal regulation panels. 18 months of development, $8,200 in testing costs I paid myself. Patent filed before Robert knew it existed. The modular foundation system, 11 months of work, $5,400 in materials and tests, patents secured. In 6 years, I filed 14 patents covering various aspects of sustainable construction, modular building systems, and structural innovations. The total cost, about $47,000 in legal fees, testing costs, and development expenses. All paid from my own salary, meticulously documented, perfectly legal. Fairchild Development had relied on my innovations for 6 years. Robert and Elena had no idea they were operating under an implied license that could end at any moment. I sealed the boxes with tape and stacked them near the door. The office now looked sterile, generic, as if I had never worked there. That was exactly the point. Robert wanted to teach me a lesson about hierarchy. He wanted me to sit at home for 2 weeks reflecting on my insubordination. He wanted me to come back grateful for my salary and ready to apologize. He had just given me the perfect exit strategy. I took out my laptop one last time, opened a blank document, typed 2 paragraphs, printed it on company letterhead, and signed at the bottom. Then I left it in the center of my now empty desk, where Elena would see it first thing the next morning. The resignation letter was simple, effective immediately. I resigned from my position as project director at Fairchild Development Corporation. Please consider this my official notice. I will not be returning to my position following my suspension period. All ongoing projects currently under my supervision will need to be reassigned. I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the company's growth over the last 6 years. Sincerely, Lucas Fairchild. I didn't mention Elena. I didn't bring up the impossible schedule. I didn't explain my reasons. Professional and clean. The kind of resignation letter that looks perfectly reasonable to any lawyer who might examine it later. I carried the boxes to my car, a 2015 Honda Civic with 143,000 miles on the odometer that ran perfectly, and drove home. My apartment was a modest two-bedroom in Lakeview. Nothing fancy, but paid for with money I had earned and that no one could take away from me. That evening, I pulled out files I had been organizing for 2 years, the EcoFrame system patent documentation, licensing agreements I had drafted but never executed, contact information for competitors who had tried to recruit me over the years, and a business plan for my own architectural consulting firm that I had written during quieter weekends. I had been preparing for this moment longer than I wanted to admit. A part of me had always known it would end this way. Around 9 p.m., my phone started ringing. Elena. I declined the call. She called back immediately. Declined again. Then Robert called. Then Elena again. I turned off my phone and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit. I made coffee and went for a run along the lake. I came back and actually ate breakfast instead of inhaling a protein bar in traffic. My phone was still off. I turned it back on around 10 a.m. just to see what had happened. 47 missed calls, 32 messages, 15 voicemails. The text showed a progression from confusion to panic. Elena, where are you? We have the client meeting at 9. Elena, this isn't funny. Call me back. Elena, Lucas, answer your phone right now. Robert, we need to discuss your resignation. This is unacceptable. Call me immediately. We can fix this. Monica, Lucas, everyone is panicking. They found your letter. What is happening? The voicemails were even better. I listened to them while making a second cup of coffee. Robert's voice, trying to sound calm but failing. Lucas, I think we both said things in the heat of anger yesterday. Let's talk about this like adults. The suspension was an overreaction. Come back to the office. Elena, without even trying to hide the panic. You can't just quit. We have 6 active projects you are leading. This is so selfish. Then Fairchild Development's lawyer, a guy named Benjamin Hart. Mr. Fairchild, this is Benjamin Hart. We need to discuss the transition of your current projects and any potential contractual obligations. Please call me back as soon as possible. I deleted everything without replying. Instead, I opened my computer and started making real calls to people who actually respected my work. The first went to Adrian Morales, a senior partner at Apex Architecture. We had worked together on a joint project 2 years earlier. Fairchild Development handled the structural engineering, and Apex did the architectural design. Adrian had been trying to recruit me ever since. Lucas, I didn't expect to hear from you. What's going on? I left Fairchild Development. I'm launching my own consulting firm focused on sustainable structural engineering and architectural innovation. I wanted to know if you would be interested in contracting for some of your upcoming projects. There was a long silence. Are you serious? You really left. Yesterday. I have proprietary modular construction and sustainable design systems that could cut your project costs by 30% while improving efficiency. Are you interested? Obviously, I'm interested. When can we meet? We set a lunch for the next day. 2 hours later, I had appointments scheduled with 4 other firms. By the end of the week, I had signed 3 consulting contracts at $200 an hour, far more than what I earned at Fairchild Development if you accounted for all the unpaid overtime. But that was just the beginning. The real blow was the patents. I called my lawyer, Sophia Park, a frighteningly efficient woman specializing in intellectual property law. I had been working with her for 2 years on creating the LLC and filing patents for every major innovation I had developed. Sophia, it's time. I want to start licensing the EcoFrame system to Fairchild's competitors. She paused. Are you sure? Once you do this, there is no turning back. I am sure. Draft the licensing agreements at market rate plus royalties and send a cease and desist letter to Fairchild Development for any unauthorized use of my patented systems. That is going to hurt them. They use your designs as their flagship product. I know. That is exactly the point. It took exactly 4 days for Fairchild Development to understand they were in very serious trouble. The first sign appeared with the Island Park Estates project, a luxury development of 8 custom homes halfway through construction. All were using the EcoFrame system. On the 3rd day, the general contractor called me directly. Lucas, it's Daniel Wong from Lakeside Construction. We have a problem on the Island Park project. The engineering team is asking questions about the EcoFrame specs, and no one at Fairchild is able to explain how the load distribution works. That is because I designed it, and I don't work there anymore. They said they can finish without you, But the junior architect they assigned to the project doesn't understand the structural calculations. He wants to switch to traditional steel beams, which will double the material costs and add 6 weeks to the schedule. I replied, I know, and that is why I am calling you. Can we hire you directly as a consultant to finish the project? I gave him my consulting rate. He accepted immediately. I drafted a contract clearly stating that I was an independent consultant, not an employee of Fairchild Development. 2 hours later, Daniel called me back, visibly stressed. Lucas, I just got a call from Robert Fairchild. He is threatening to sue me if I hire you on this project. On what grounds? I no longer work for him. I am an independent consultant, and you are a private contractor. He has no standing. He says you are using proprietary company information. I almost laughed. Daniel, I am going to send you documents proving that I own the patents for the EcoFrame system. Fairchild Development was using my intellectual property under an implied license that ended when I resigned. In reality, they are the ones using proprietary information without authorization. Silence. Are you telling me that Robert doesn't own the design of his flagship product? Correct. I own it, and I am going to make that very clear. That afternoon, Sophia sent the cease and desist letter to Fairchild Development by certified mail. The letter was beautifully written, clear, professional, and absolutely devastating. It informed the company that all EcoFrame system patents belonged to my LLC, that my resignation had terminated any implied license for use, and that any continued use without a formal licensing agreement constituted intellectual property infringement. The letter included a list of all active Fairchild Development projects using my patented systems, accompanied by documents proving my ownership. It also proposed a licensing agreement at market rate, $50,000 per project plus 3% of project revenue in ongoing royalties. Robert called me within the hour of signing for the certified letter. I let the call go to voicemail. His voice was different this time, not angry, but scared. Lucas, we need to talk about this cease and desist. This is absurd. You developed these systems while working for Fairchild Development. The company owns this intellectual property. I called Sophia. Can I reply? Of course. Stay professional, admit nothing. Make no threats. Just state the facts. I replied to Robert by email, not by phone, so everything was documented. Robert, I developed the EcoFrame system and all associated innovations on my personal time using my own resources. All patents were filed via my personal LLC before any implementation at Fairchild Development. You operated under an implied license during my employment. That license ended with my resignation. If you wish to continue using these systems, we can discuss a formal licensing agreement. Otherwise, you may redesign your current projects with alternative systems. Sincerely, Lucas. His reply arrived 4 minutes later in all caps. This is extortion. I will not be bullied by my own son. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the email to Sophia with a note. Please document this for any future legal proceedings. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Fairchild Development collapse in slow motion through industry contacts who kept me informed. The Island Park project completely stalled on day 6. The junior architect Robert had hired, a young graduate named Ryan who had worked under me for 8 months, tried to redesign the structural system using traditional methods. The poor guy was completely overwhelmed. I had trained him enough to follow my designs, but he didn't have the experience necessary to create new ones from scratch. Daniel Wong, the general contractor, sent me daily updates, even though I hadn't asked for them. Day 7. Ryan proposes using standard steel I-beams instead of EcoFrame. Material costs just jumped from $340,000 to $680,000. Clients are panicking. Day 9. Construction halted. Ryan's calculations don't account for thermal expansion of the custom glazing system. If we build as he planned, the glass will crack within 6 months. Day 12. 3 of the 8 owners threatened to pull out. Deposits are in escrow, but they are lawyering up. Every message was another nail in Fairchild's coffin. The lakefront mansion Elena had promised in 90 days? That project imploded spectacularly on day 10. The tech executive who had signed the contract hired a forensic construction expert to compare the schedule I had sent him with the one promised by Elena. The report was damning. It demonstrated that Elena's schedule was physically impossible, even with unlimited resources and perfect weather conditions. The lawsuit dropped on day 14, filed in the Circuit Court of Cook County, case number 2024 L003847. Out of curiosity, I looked up the public filing. The counts were devastating: fraudulent inducement, breach of contract, and negligent misrepresentation. The client wasn't just claiming the return of his $800,000 deposit. He was also asking for $400,000 in consequential damages for having to cancel his move from California. I learned through a mutual contact at the title company that Robert had to take out a $3 million bridge loan using his lake house as collateral just to cover legal defense costs and a potential settlement. The interest rate was 9.5% because his credit score had taken a hit when Fairchild Development missed payments to 3 different suppliers. The Darlington Heights commercial project, a $6.2 million office building that was 60% complete, stopped dead on day 16. That one hurt me because I genuinely liked that client, a small, growing tech company that needed its own space. The project used the EcoFrame system for interior load-bearing walls. Without me to supervise, the carpentry team didn't understand the installation sequence. They installed the panels in the wrong order, compromising the structural integrity of the entire West Wing. The structural engineer on that project, a guy named Trevor Lawson whom I had worked with on 4 previous sites, called me directly. "Lucas, I had to put the whole west sector on a stop work order. They're going to have to tear everything down and rebuild. We're talking $340,000 in rework plus 8 extra weeks on the schedule. The client demands that Robert cover the costs since it is a Fairchild design error." It wasn't a design error, I corrected. It was an installation error because Robert entrusted a complex structural system to an untrained architect. "Do you want to step in as a consultant to fix this? I can bring you in as an independent expert. Send me the contract. My rate is $200 an hour." Trevor hired me that afternoon. I spent 4 days on-site supervising the demolition and reconstruction of the West Wing, teaching the carpentry crew the correct installation sequence. I billed Fairchild Development's client directly for $9,600 plus expenses. The client paid without complaint because I actually knew what I was doing. Meanwhile, 2 other projects came to a total halt when clients withdrew their deposits after hearing about the lawsuit. One was a $4.8 million custom home in Lake Forest, the other a $3.2 million renovation project in Lincoln Park. Both clients had paid 15% deposits, totaling $1.2 million, that Robert had already spent on operating costs instead of placing them in escrow as he should have. The clients immediately hired lawyers. More lawsuits were filed, more legal fees, and even more damage to Fairchild's reputation. Elena tried to call me 6 times in a single day. She left voicemails that started with fake apologies and ended with thinly veiled threats. "Lucas, I know we have our differences, but this is bigger than us. The company is in trouble, jobs are at stake. You have to come back and help fix this." Then, when I didn't answer, "Fine, be selfish. But when this company goes under, it will be your fault. I hope you can live with that." I deleted every voicemail without listening to the end. Meanwhile, my consulting business was thriving far beyond anything I had imagined. The first contract came through Adrian Morales at Apex Architecture on just the 3rd day after my resignation. We met for what was supposed to be a casual lunch at a restaurant in River North. It turned into a 3-hour business meeting during which Adrian laid out 6 projects his firm was stuck on, all requiring exactly the type of sustainable structural solution I had been developing for years. "I'm going to be frank with you," Adrian said, pushing his plate away and pulling out a folder full of project specs. "We have a $12 million mixed-use program in Pilsen that is stalled because we can't meet the city's new energy efficiency requirements without blowing the budget. Your EcoFrame system would solve the problem. But Robert asked us for $280,000 just for licensing rights before you even stepped in." I examined the documents. It was a good project. Affordable housing on the first 3 floors, commercial spaces on the ground floor, a rooftop solar installation. Exactly the kind of project that actually serves communities rather than just wealthy individuals. I will do the structural design consulting at $200 an hour, and I will license the EcoFrame system for $35,000 plus 1.5% of the construction cost savings you realize compared to traditional methods. You will save about $180,000 in materials and 8 weeks on the schedule. Adrian didn't hesitate. Deal. When can you start? The contract was signed that afternoon. That project became my proof of concept, completed in 6 weeks at a cost $220,000 lower than the initial budget projection. The client was so satisfied he recommended me to 3 other developers. By the second week, I had consulting contracts with 4 different firms. Apex Architecture, a $47,000 contract for the Pilsen project. Morrison & Associates, $23,000 for the structural review of a troubled office renovation. Greenspace Builders, $31,000 for a sustainable residential project in Hyde Park. Urban Core Development, $28,000 for the redesign of a downtown commercial building. Revenue in just 2 weeks, $129,000. More than I earned in 6 months at Fairchild Development when accounting for all unpaid overtime. Word spread very fast in the Chicago architectural community. Apparently, many firms had watched Fairchild Development's rise with envy, wondering how Robert managed to deliver his projects with such efficiency. Now they knew. It wasn't Robert or Elena. It was the systems I had developed. And suddenly, those systems were available to everyone except Fairchild. In the 3rd week, I hired my first employee, Monica, my former assistant at Fairchild. She had resigned the day after I left, visibly fed up with seeing Elena treat her like a personal servant. She called me in tears, explaining that Robert had just yelled at her for 20 minutes because no one could find the files for the Island Park project, files I had organized and maintained, and whose system no one else knew. Do you want a job? I asked her. Yes? Please. When? Tomorrow. Monica became my office manager for $55,000 a year, which was 15% more than what Robert paid her. Every cent was worth it because she knew my organization systems and could be operational immediately. In the 4th week, I hired 2 junior architects who had worked under me at Fairchild. Both had left the company voluntarily after seeing the chaos and realizing the ship was sinking. The first was Ryan, the same one Robert had promoted to replace me before realizing he was totally out of his depth. Ryan called me on day 18, his voice desperate. Lucas, I am drowning here. Robert demands I fix problems I don't even understand. Elena blames everything on me, and I am working 90 hours a week trying to learn systems you took years to develop. I am done. Can I come work for you? I offered him $68,000 to start, 40 hours a week, and a promise that I would train him properly instead of throwing him into the deep end. The second was Mariana Flores, a talented architect stuck at Fairchild doing simple drafting because Elena constantly took credit for her design ideas. She had been looking for a way out for months, but had stayed due to a competitive market. Fairchild's collapse gave her the necessary push. I want to do work that means something, she told me during the interview. Not just luxury houses for people who have too much money and not enough taste. I want to design buildings that actually serve communities. That is exactly what we do here. When can you start? We set up a small office in the West Loop. 1,200 square feet, exposed brick walls, lots of natural light, nothing flashy. The rent was $3,400 a month, easily covered by a single consulting contract. I bought used furniture from an office supply liquidation and found good deals on computers and software licenses. Startup costs, $18,000 paid from my savings without touching client revenue. First month's revenue, $187,000 spread over 9 different contracts. After expenses and payroll, $94,000 in profit. I had earned more in 1 month than I had in a year at Fairchild. And for the first time in years, I actually loved my work. But the true satisfaction came from elsewhere, watching Robert's empire crumble. 6 weeks after my resignation, Robert showed up at my new office. It was a Tuesday morning. I was checking structural calculations for a community center project. A modest budget, but useful work that actually served people instead of flattering an executive's ego. My assistant buzzed the intercom. Lucas, there is someone for you. He says he is your father. I looked at the security camera screen. Robert stood in the lobby, looking older. The arrogance that once held his back straight was gone. He looked like a man who had been carrying a burden too heavy for too long. Send him in, I said. He walked slowly into my office, observing the exposed brick walls, the modern lighting, the sleek efficiency of a business that was actually solvent. I didn't stand up. I didn't offer him coffee or a chair. I remained seated behind my desk, hands resting on a set of blueprints. Elena is gone, he said after a long silence. I let her go this morning. She is moving to Arizona to stay with her aunt. I nodded. Probably safer. The tech executive settled the case. It cost me $2.8 million. I had to sell the lake house to cover the sum. I know. He took a step forward, hesitating to sit. We can't finish Island Park without the eco-frame license. The contractors are threatening to leave. The bank calls every day. Sounds complicated. I came to make you an offer, Lucas. He stopped as if announcing something that should fill me with joy. Come back. Not as project director, but as CEO. I am retiring to the position of chairman of the board. You get full operational control and 51% of the voting rights. The whole company is yours. It was the offer I had dreamed of throughout my 20s, the recognition I had fought for. He was admitting that I was the only one capable of running the company, and he was trying to sell me my own inheritance. What is the catch? I asked in a neutral voice. You licensed the intellectual property to the company. We finish the projects. We rebuild the reputation. It is a Fairchild legacy, Lucas. It belongs to you. I looked at him and saw something I had never seen before. Not a titan of industry, not even a father, just a desperate man standing in the ruins of what he had destroyed, trying to trade ashes for salvation. No, I said. He blinked. Pardon. The answer is no. I do not want the job. I do not want the shares. I do not want the legacy. You are being stubborn. I am offering you everything you ever wanted. I admit you were right. You won. I didn't win, Robert. I escaped. That is different. I stood up and walked to the window. The Chicago skyline stretched out before me, filled with buildings I had helped create and those I would design in the future. You think you are offering me an empire, but you are offering me a toxic site. The company is damaged, the brand is compromised, and the culture is rotten. If I came back, I wouldn't build anything. I would spend the next decade cleaning up your mess. I turned to him. But that is not the real reason I am saying no. This was the defining moment, the final cut. You didn't raise me, Robert. You managed me. You treated my loyalty like a renewable resource you could exploit for profit. You demanded devotion, but you only offered conditional employment. I am your father, he whispered, and I am a separate legal entity. Breaking the blood bond is not malice, it is self-preservation. It is the only way to save yourself from a system that sees you as a resource, not a person. I returned to my desk and sat down. If I came back, I would be accepting the idea that my value depends on your approval. I would be accepting being a Fairchild first and a person second. I reject that idea. I am not saving the Fairchild name. I am saving Lucas. He looked at me for a long time. The silence was heavy and final. At that moment, he understood he had no leverage left. He couldn't fire me. He couldn't disown me. He couldn't even guilt-trip me because the account was closed. What are you going to do? He asked finally. With the patents. I'm going to license them to other firms. Competitors. Builders who pay their bills and respect their architects. EcoFrame will build thousands of homes, Robert. Just not yours. He nodded slowly. He didn't say goodbye. He simply turned and left my office, shoulders slumped, walking toward a future he hadn't foreseen. I watched him leave through the window. I wasn't sad or triumphant. I was simply clear-headed. I turned back to my desk. The community center plans were waiting for me. A project that would serve real people, built on foundations I had laid myself. I picked up my pencil. The line was straight, the structure was solid, and for the first time in my life, the design belonged entirely to me. Comment. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is draw a line with the people you're supposed to trust the most. Setting boundaries isn't an act of aggression. It's an act of self-respect. It's about recognizing your value even when others take it for granted. You always have the power to choose what you will and will not accept. Staying in an environment that drains you isn't loyalty. It's a slow erosion of your spirit. True strength is walking away from a battle you know you can't win in a healthy way. Taking responsibility for your own peace is one of the kindest things you can do for yourself. You deserve to build your own foundation, one rooted in respect and integrity. And remember to be kind to yourself along the way. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.